Hi, everybody. I'm here with Giselle Shardlow, and we are going to be talking about her school yoga program. So we'll get started right away. What inspired you to start the school yoga program?
Oh, thanks, Margaret. It's so good to meet you in person. We've known each other for years, so there's just nothing better than being in person. So, thanks for having me, and thanks for have given this opportunity to talk about the school yoga program. So, what happened was probably about 4 years ago. This is just 2021. What what had been happening, Margaret, and you can probably relate to this with your therapy source as well, is that what we found is that our community was were going out to take yoga teacher training or mindfulness training or had their own yoga mindfulness practice, and they came back to their communities and they didn't know how to implement into their school program or their community, for example, right? And so we did a lot of surveys with our community and we looked at, okay, what are the common obstacles that everybody is having in order to implement it into their different roles? So they were pediatric therapists or counselors or teachers or parents or recreation leaders. There's lots of different roles they're coming from different countries, different cities around the world, different economic backgrounds, different diverse needs of the children. So there's lots of differences in the communities that people were working with. And it really wasn't a cookie cutter experience, right? Really wasn't a one size fits all. So we put together all these obstacles that people were having and put into this school yoga program. That's kind of how it came to be. And we knew that people needed to have something that was easy, step by step, a formula as such, right? And these obstacles, by the way, are same as what you would do when what they asked for in a grant, for example. So even going through the program, you're going through the same kinds of asking the same questions. So that's really where it came to, step by step, easy, not add anything more to your plate, but something that they can the next day implement and cater to the needs and preferences of their students.
So getting started right away, they're ready to implement it, and you've already removed a lot of those barriers that they might have experienced had they tried to do it on their own.
100%. Yes,
Okay, great.
exactly.
And what impact would you say overall, big picture, do you think
Yeah.
it has on a school when you implement this program?
Yeah. In fact, it reminds me, I was just listening to Mark Brackett the other day, author of Permission to Feel. He's at Yale University, and he was really diving deep into this, the importance of students having social and emotional skill training as well as cognitive. And he's seen in his students, his university students, the biggest indicator of success is that children are equally balanced in social emotional as well as the cognitive. And we always think of, our students getting them through, it's almost like they come into kindergarten and some of us parents, educators are already setting them up for university, right?
Oh,
And
yeah. Oh, I
really,
know.
right? And there's a lot of steps that have to happen. And we're seeing this. I've been working as a teacher substitute, and I'm seeing the big behaviors, Margaret, very different from when I was a young teacher many years ago. So the yoga and mindfulness, this is an ancient practice. This is 5,000 years old. It's not like it's a trend. It's not a fad. It's not going anywhere. The research is showing, I think, majority of people in the United States, for example, and globally have tried a yoga and mindfulness practice in some way, shape, or form, right? And in a lot of schools, it's already as part of the curriculum. So the impact there is really about children's wellness, helping them self-regulate, helping them manage their big emotions, helping them get along with each other, helping them critically think. And we're, especially in this day and age of AI, right? And everything's artificial. It's our job as teachers and families is to to help guide our children into these creative thinking, critically thinking, problem solving, social interactions. All these skills are so important so they can live in a world of AI and make those choices that are for the best of their health and wellness.
So I think what you're saying is we have to regulate before we educate. And if our
Right.
brains aren't ready to take in that information, it's not coming in. And so we
No.
need to have all these kids' bodies ready to take in the information. And when you talk to about AI and the future of where we're headed, I think it's so important too that we acknowledge the amount of overstimulation that the kids have nowadays, like you were saying about the changes in behaviors. And I think when we look at how much they're bombarded with screens and video games and so much overstimulation and dopamine hits all the time, to teach them mindfulness and yoga where they can really reset, I think is a lifelong skill that is has to be top priority in this overstimulated world we're living in for these kids to develop self-regulation skills throughout life. And it's a skill they can do throughout life. You can do it alone, you can do it with a group. So, I think that's really important too. Just such a great life skill to teach the students in today's overstimulated world.
Yeah, you said it so perfectly. 100% I agree. It's really about slowing the curriculum down, right? You walk into a classroom now, the demands of the educators, it's impossible, right?
Hmm.
And even the therapists who are pushing in or pulling out, there's so much curriculum, so many needs that we have to get through. How do we slow down and focus on what matters and connect with our children at a deeper level? How do we have them have voices heard, their agency,
Student agency,
making
yes.
right and having them have a say in their curriculum and maybe I think the reality is everything that's happening right now, we are going to see a transformation in the education system. It's much needed. And I think this is a time where we can say, here's what we think is important. Let's include the student voice in the changes that we want to make and not just top down, but let's hear from what the children are experiencing, you know. Like for example, my child, like most of us, right? My child wants nothing to do with yoga and mindfulness. This is not a surprise. But this morning we were actually early we had to go to chorus early before school, and it was raining here in outside of Boston. And I found her behind my car about to back up, and she said, "Mom, come listen to the rain." And I stood beside her, Margaret, and I thought, those are those miracle moments, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's at home, whether it's in the clinic, in the classroom, but you know, I- they're getting it. They're getting it, and what the difference in the school yoga program, it's just about bringing attention to these moments. That's what yoga mindfulness is, bringing attention to these moments and kind of putting a spotlight on the miracleness. I could have easily have said, "Oh, never mind. I got to go. We got to get in the car. But I stood with her for 7 minutes. No joke. This is not something that is regular and normal for us. So it was a special moment, right?
right.
It
A
it filled
bonding
my heart.
moment.
A
Right.
bonding
And
moment.
and how much we rush around, but you took the time to spend that quiet moment in the present together. It's
Exactly.
so important. And I
Exactly.
think when you said too about speaking how things have changed, when I think back to when I was a child and no cell phones, no screen time, you're
Mhm.
riding in the car for long periods of time without entertainment, you had mindfulness moments. You're staring out the
Yes.
window, just watching the rain come down on the car. You had no choice but to have mindfulness moments.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're not given those opportunities at all. So we do have to somewhat make time for it. It
Yes.
can't just be assumed that they're getting that in their daily lives, because I believe most students and children probably are not for the
Yeah.
standards that are so high. And like you said, teachers and staff and related service professionals, they're almost put in this impossible situation of these
Mhm.
crazy high academic standards to meet when you're losing all that time on social emotional development, especially in the younger grades,
Mhm.
where everything is just so accelerated. How do you feel that this school yoga program, speaking of that, helps support the
Mhm.
professionals, the teachers who are going to implement it in the classroom? How does it support them?
Yes, that's a great question. All the work that we do, we always start with the teachers, right? It's so important. So one of our bonuses when people sign on is a separate course, a mini course called Yoga Mindfulness 101, right? And to set that philosophy and it's the starting of what are you interested in? So some people might be interested in yoga, some mindfulness. And I love what you were talking about there about curating. I have another quick story. I was on the yoga mat just earlier doing my with my Peloton at home. I love my home practice. And I was coming into an upward facing dog, and I look up and all of a sudden there's two deer. I just it just like it just burst my I was in a smile, and it was like one of those moments. But like as you say, to curate these moments. So for teachers in the classroom, how do we curate this sense of yoga mindful, these moments of being connected in the moment, in the present, letting other things, our anxieties and our worries, fall away. I mean, in the classroom, my favorite was the hand on heart, just taking a pause, a deep breath, right? It's a lot. It's a lot right now. So the support that the teachers have, we're finding, starting with them, they're getting as much or more benefit. In fact, actually, I was speaking to Susan Dreher-Leon, who's the professor in Antioch University, and she's leading the mindfulness for educators certification or masters. And she was saying there was research out of, I want to say, Scotland, saying that they did research on yoga mindfulness in schools, and they're finding that the teachers are getting as much or more benefit than the children.
I could
So it's a
totally see that. I mean, and it falls right in line with co-regulation. What's our job as teachers and parents and related service professionals when children are struggling or they're little? Self-regulation starts with co-regulation, and we're there to support and help them. And if we've been taught these techniques of mindfulness and yoga and deep breathing, then we can model them. We can also teach them. But if we don't know them, our co-regulation abilities aren't where they could be. I know as an adult, I'm learning all the time. I'm and trying to improve my emotional regulation, my self-regulation. I'm sort of a firecracker.
yeah,
And
right.
I'm enjoying learning so much more about it because I found it helps me, just like you said, as an adult.
Mhm.
And we have 6 children ranging in age from adults all the way down to our youngest is 10. And you see how much these skills help out in parenting, no matter how old your children are, adults
Yeah.
versus little ones, to be able to take a moment, to take a breath before you respond, to be able to just take that time and to be present, not to be always worried about what's coming, is just so huge, I think, as a
Mhm.
parent and a related service provider to establish those co-regulation strategies.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point there too, Margaret, that there is a lot of myth about what yoga and mindfulness is. And this is not about sitting on the top of a mountain, cross-legged, in the middle of nowhere. Right. And I think that once you realize that yoga and mindfulness will meet you and your students wherever you're at. So firecracker, absolutely. There's no shame in that. And then it's really about, how do I use these different practices? There's so many to choose from, breathing, yoga, the postures, mindfulness, meditation, whatever it is. I'm going to pick what is going to suit me best. And then what the school yoga program then does also is where it meets you where you're at, and then looks at what are the needs of this population of children you're working with, or a child if you're working one-to-one in a pediatric therapist situation. So you can tailor it, right? It's going to look different for who's showing up in that moment. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter, as I said.
Okay, great. I think there where you're talking about the school yoga program, where you just mentioned that again, can you describe exactly kind of the path of what it is?
Yes. So it has a combination of online curriculum. So there's videos, PDFs, there's expert interviews you have access to as soon as you sign up. And then we have 3 coaching calls where we meet, more of a Q&A, community gathering. We really help people through their designing their school yoga program. And the way it's set up, as you go through the modules, there's little bits of homework as you go along. And at the end, it all put together into a school yoga program document. So you've
Okay.
got that, in which, because I'm really a big fan of putting things into action. You might have
Uh-huh.
gathered.
Yep.
So there's no point us, that is one thing with therapists and counselors and families, all of us educators, we have a lot of ideas, but it's how to put it into action. It's just like that. It's, using my teacher brain, taking all this information, how do we make it customized to our community, and how do we put it into a plan that's actionable, that we're inspired and we can get going. It's not something that's going to live on your computer. This is a working document that you're going to try, and we talk about implementation, And even when you finish the program, we're available by email. We have biannual meetups. We have lots of different community gatherings. A lot of our folks join our monthly membership that's really low cost. We also have monthly live events with that too. So it's a very, we're an inner circle. We're very high touch, very involved with people's programs. So yeah, this is our passion. This is our work.
I think that's great too, especially for related service professionals to have that community because oftentimes we might be alone in the school. You might just have
Mhm.
one occupational therapist or one physical therapist amongst multiple schools. And so to have that community where you can bounce ideas off of and get that guidance and that coaching, I think is really beneficial, especially in terms of related service professionals. And also, I would think educators, you might be the first one in your district trying to encourage this type of program for your social emotional learning, and it helps to have people supporting you and encouraging you to continue taking those action steps. So I would imagine that's a huge bonus.
Yes.
Can you share
Yeah.
with us a success story from one of the schools, maybe where you implemented the program, or more than one
Yes.
success story, whatever you
Yes.
think would be the best?
Yeah, I've got three. I had to
Okay,
narrow it down, but
perfect.
so one a school counselor, I think my favorite story, Amy, she joined us in our very first one 4 years ago or so. And she, after going through the program, she decided to create mindful Monday morning announcements. So as a school counselor, that was her idea of thinking, how can I make a difference with the whole school? And so she had a curriculum written every Monday morning. She would read it over the announcements, and then she had, Google slides that she shared with the teachers, and they could implement it during the week. So her story is incredible. She also practiced yoga mindfulness in her school counseling sessions. She went on to do after school and weekends. It all went from there. But the one story I must share is my favorite. So there was a time where they've been practicing breathing, and one of the breaths was this figure eight. And it came a situation where there was an accident. One of the little friends fell off in the playground and was taken away by an ambulance. So the principal said, Amy, please help, go down to that wing. There's 50 kids and teachers. Everybody's frenetic and upset and all that. So to your point about to ask those children to go back to the classroom and be ready to learn was not going to happen, right?
Hmm.
So she came in front of the group with the children and the teachers, and she just put up her hand and started to practice the figure eight breath. It's as simple as that. Complete shift in the emotional energy of that group, right? So here's the simplicity. Had she not taken all of her ideas and sat with them and thought, what's going to make the best impact? What do my students really need? Right? Then the consistency of doing it every week,
Hmm.
right? To have it part of their life, they wouldn't have had that access because you're not going to teach them a figure eight breath
Right.
when they're in that mood, right? So that was my favorite story. That's one. Second one, we have a physical education teacher, a PE teacher, Leslie. She added yoga mindfulness naturally into her yoga classes in her PE classes. So it was before doing warm ups and cool downs, and then they would add some mindfulness. And she just would do it before she'd really told any of her colleagues or principal. She was just kind of naturally doing it. And she was starting to see the children really appreciating it and asking for, can we do those postures? Or can we have that moment at the end to lay down our backs? Or can we do some breathing or whatever? So then she thought, okay, I'm going to take that to putting a proposal together to the whole school. And then she designed like an 8-week course that she could do and then pitch to other schools. Then she applied to a grant. It was just snowballed from there, just from let me just try something and see what's going to happen. Right. And then thirdly, we have a school-based OT. Deidre, she works in Northern Canada with a First Nations community. So she drives around to lots of different communities, and that she's found in her OT. She was helping the children with emotional regulation, with their flexibility and their balancing, their core, their social skills, whatever was needed in that moment. And then she was able to put together all of her ideas into a family resource pack. So this was her like legacy to leave, imagine, with these real isolated rural communities and say, here are some yoga mindfulness activities, during the week in schools or on the weekends with your family or whatever. So that made a huge difference. So then all of a sudden now the whole community is involved. Because I think that's really our biggest. I was listening to an interview the other day with the president of Castle, the social immersion and learning organization. And that's really our goal, right? Is not just to impact a classroom, as you say, with pediatric therapists, not just your clinic, or your sessions, but can you impact your school? Can you impact your communities? Can the families get involved? And then it becomes something that it's just something we do, right?
Right, right. It's a tier one intervention. I mean, at the end of the day, should be a tier one intervention for all students. Do we have children who struggle maybe more than others? Yes, who might need more explicit instruction during a therapy session, an occupational therapy or a counseling session. But in general, like the announcements where you're using this as a tier one intervention, it's wonderful for that exact example you're giving. They already had
Mhm.
received explicit instructions. So when the moment came where they really needed it, they were ready. And I
Yeah.
love your example of sharing it with families because,
Mhm.
again, in terms of related services, we might be there 30 minutes a week on consult or direct service. And that's kids are at home for so many hours, and sometimes it's hard to reach them when you're in a school. So if you were that part of those action steps was developing a program that would also support parents and families, I think that's amazing. A path we all need to go on because everybody
Yes.
needs help in this overstimulated world. The same thing we said before, we all
Oh,
need it.
all need it.
It's
Seriously.
tough to stay focused and, get your mind ready to take in information. So
Right.
we're just so bombarded as a society in general.
Yeah.
So, all right, what else? I think I might have one or two more questions. Oh, this is a good one. What do you recommend if someone is working in a school and maybe administrators, teachers, they're struggling to get buy-in or support from other educators or professionals in the district or families or
Yes.
students?
Yes, yes. And actually, this is a whole module because this was
Okay.
one of the questions, Margaret, we heard time and time again. It's hard, right? You have a reputation as a therapist or a counselor or an educator. You don't want to be introducing something that you're not comfortable with yourself and you afraid that the students aren't going to like it or they're going to call it lame or this is stupid or the administration come in and they're saying, what are you doing? And you have to prove yourself. I get it, right? The buy-in situation is a whole lesson in amongst itself. So we go deeper into, what's behind the thoughts, right? The same like what's under the iceberg when we look at behaviors, but
Right, right.
what's under the what's under the surface there with families? Can we address some of their questions? Is it a religious question? This is a non-secular yoga mindfulness program. So this is we take from the yoga principles that come from a non-secular script.
Okay.
So we're not adding, Sanskrit words and things like this. So it's a secular, non-secular, secular
Secular. Yes,
practice.
secular.
Yes, thank you. I got the word wrong. In any case, so we're looking at, answering those questions with the administration and the families. We're talking to administration and looking at the educational standards, saying here's exactly like the SEL standards. Here's exactly what we're focusing on: the social skills, the problem solving, the creative thinking, all those pieces. So then they're thinking, okay, come and watch, come into the classroom, into my clinic, and see what we're doing, see the impact, get feedback from the students where you just trying things out, get recording down what they're saying, do exit strategy, enter and exit,
Exit
you
tickets.
know, and then you start to look at, okay, quantitative and qualitative data. Even if you're just starting right now, right, and just starting the creative ideas just to get going, collecting that data right from the get-go. So you've got things to prove. And then if you're targeting the skills, this is the really important part, right? This is not about let's just go do whatever. Like, I haven't done my yoga practice on the mat this morning. Let's throw on, something. This is not that. This is about what skills are we targeting? Is it emotional regulation? Is it that we want to talk about the core and the flexibility for these young kiddos who are sitting in desks when they're 5 years old, right? What do we want to build there? Do we want to help them balancing? Do we want to help their, if it's a speech language, do we want to help them open up their chests and their throats? What is it that we're actually targeting? That's where we're going to get the buy-in. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Just making sure that we're educating everybody the benefits, and especially like you said with the social emotional learning standards, I think that's a big one because that's new for schools too. Of now we
Yeah.
have standards in this area. We have literacy standards, we have math standards. And so I think if you can come and offering that and educating in that area, that's a huge bonus for getting buy-in. And I
Right.
like what you're saying about a lot about student agency and student preferences and what did you get out of this and getting their feedback because they're the ones that we really at the end of the day want them to have these skills. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's a bonus that we're learning them at the same time, but the goal of
Right.
course is for the students to develop these skills.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think along that lines, I think too what's happened. I remember last fall, an SLP took the school yoga program, and she came in with the idea that she was going to integrate it with her sessions. And what she started to share with the other teachers in her school, and they all said, actually, we want it. So instead, she came out with creating a professional development 8-week series for educators. So in terms of buy-in, that, having the educators feel it for themselves, that's a great way to start. This
Yeah,
doesn't
that's a
have
great
to
idea.
happen all overnight. It's small incremental steps forward. This is not about, okay, we're going to turn everything upside down and this is what you're going to do. No, it's about what is some small steps I can take that transform little areas of my sessions as a pediatric therapist? How do I support the teachers that I'm working with? How do I look at bringing it into the whole school? Then, your school becomes your pilot program, and then you may have bigger plans to go district wide or whatever, right? But whatever it is you want to do, each child you make a difference with is golden.
Right. 100%. And
And
so
we're on
just,
a mission. We're on a mission to transform 100,000 classrooms by 2026. And
oh,
that's
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 great.
what that's what drives us. That's our value-based mission, and this is what we're up to. It's a difficult time right now. And this is what we got to do.
Right, right.
One child at a time.
Right. And then, like you said, moves on to one school and maybe one district or one, general region. So to kind of sum it up, let me see if I have it all correct. The
Yeah,
kids yoga program, it's the school yoga program is ready to go for you. You've removed a lot of the obstacles that people would experience if they were doing it on their own.
yeah,
You're very focused on making sure you get action steps in place for your specific group of students that you're working with or your classroom. You're very focused on supporting everyone who's also implementing this program through group coaching and emails if necessary, so that you feel supported and you're not lost alone, as we frequently are as related service professionals. So I think that's a huge bonus for us as school-based therapy providers. But the end goal being that you're teaching students to develop those emotional regulation, self-regulation, social emotional skills that they can use throughout their school career and throughout life. Did I get it right?
perfect.
Okay. Good, great. So if anybody wants to head over to your therapy source, we're going to have some information on there on how you can access the school yoga program. So be sure to check it out and email with any questions that you might have. Anything else, Giselle, before we go?
Thank you. Just sign up. You won't regret it.